Hello, all things Montessori community. Rachel here. Hope everyone's been just having a great week so far. I'm so excited about our episode today. If you guys got to watch Jamie at the refresher course, you know that she talked about adapting our Montessori history work to a post-2020 world. And it was such a fascinating session. And I felt like, it was worth us revisiting on all things Montessori. So that is what our episode is about today. Jamie and I sort of dig into her topic in a little bit more detail. There are lots of links and things that we talk about throughout this episode. And so I'm going to try to link all of them I can in the description, but I'll also be sharing them on Instagram because I know that, it's easier sometimes just have them spread out. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We are supported by Patreon. Thank you to all our patrons. You guys, we couldn't do it without you. Seriously. If you want to be like one of these amazing people, you can sign up on our Patreon page. The link is below. We would love to have you. Speaking of our community, I sent out a newsletter last week, and I just wanted to update you guys that Jamie and I are going to switch to doing podcasts episodes every other week. The only big reason for this is because we are super swamped with the opening of our new school and with the launch of Rising Tide Montessori. There is so much going on. So Jamie and I just felt like it was better for us if we can put a little bit more thought into our episodes and, bring you that amazing content, but it'll be every other week. The best thing about this is that Montessori isn't radically changing every day or every week. It's not like we're a news podcast. So I think it will still be extremely beneficial. And again, if we get inspired, we might do more than every other week. It's just where we are at right now. And we just appreciate all of your support with all of that. This episode is brought to you by Sapling Supply. So Sapling Supply. It is the best, and we really like this company. Sapling Supply makes simple, elegant furniture for all your child's educational needs. Handmade in the U.S., each piece arrives at your door ready to use. No assembly required. How great is that? And soon, you'll have the chance to meet the two dads behind Sapling Supply. So you can join them at this year's virtual Montessori event. The American Montessori Society, or AMS, they're holding an annual conference, the biggest gathering of Montessori professionals in the world. So to find out more, you can visit www.sapling-supply.net. From there, you can find links to their virtual booth and set up a time to chat with the team at Sapling Supply. So the conference dates are March 5th and 6th, and be sure to check out Sapling Supply at the AMS conference. It's such an amazing event. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode all about history. Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Rachel. How are you?
I'm great. Looking at snow. It'll probably be melted by the time this episode comes out, but yeah, it's snowing like crazy here.
Yeah, and we've got ice everywhere here, but thankfully, not at all what Texas is experiencing right now. So sending
oh my goodness
love and support to all of you there, though hopefully by the time this is out, your lives are back to...
Hopefully you have power.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back to normal.
Things are okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, crazy. So to all of our listeners, thanks for, I know we've taken some weeks off. It's been extremely busy on our end, and Jamie was preparing for the refresher course. And I don't know if any of you guys got to tune in, but it was amazing. And so if you tuned in or if you didn't tune in, doesn't matter. We're going to do a little, kind of recap of what Jamie talked about on Sunday. And it was all about history. Jamie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you talked about at the refresher course before we dive in?
Sure. So, what I really wanted to bring to people's attention was a recognition of some issues within the way with some of the things we do in our approach to history at the elementary level, and some and some awareness to why particularly it's important to pay attention to that now after the last year, especially of events in the United States. So this was a United States focused conversation, but the events of the last year there's a lot that's happened worldwide that are similar. And I think that some of the techniques we talk about are applicable to any type of history, not just U.S. history. So, but because it was a U.S. conference, I really focused on a U.S. history approach.
Amazing. So your talk was all about, adapting history to a post-2020 world. Yeah. And especially what you just said about the events that have happened over the past year and how important that is in our history work. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, why you were called to, to this work. I know that it's very important, but, why did you feel compelled to talk about this specifically?
Well, so for the last, 12 years now, I've been working in the training world, training teachers. And thanks to my students, particularly my Black students, who really helped me to interrogate a lot of our materials. So I'm really grateful to them. I'm grateful that they pushed me on all of this. It's something I've been aware of and have been, talking about officially since I became a trainer as well. But I really, realized that our approach to history needs to be inclusive in a way that it hasn't been. And I think that's been unintentional. The Montessori history approach was created in the mid-20th century by Europeans, predominantly Europeans. And so it was obviously a product of its time and a product of the approach to the discipline of history at the time. And the reality is that the academic approach to history has shifted since then, and we need to really take a look at how our work with history also needs to shift and change.
One of the most compelling things that I found from your talk is how history is constantly being relooked at and revised and finding new evidence. Like history is constantly changing. Yep. I found that to be so enlightening and obvious, right? Like, just because a story is one way when you hear it doesn't mean that it's set in stone. And I think that's something really important to bring into the Montessori classroom, that just because it's in our sacred albums, doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. Do you know what I mean?
Or that it's in a history book or anything.
Right.
The past doesn't speak for itself. It is interpreted. It is, we find new evidence. It's not something that just speaks entirely for itself. So that's an important thing to remember when we're taking a look at history, stories, and ideas with the children, is that new evidence, new artifacts, new voices, new documents emerge, and that causes the stories that we've already known to be reinterpreted and adapted by historians and anyone else who's exploring. So it's not always even just new evidence, it's also context provided by current events or new sort of priorities based on the time that we're living in now, So yeah, that's, I think, valuable to bring to the children, because they have a tendency to just believe whatever they read. And
of course,
we can see how dangerous that is right now in a culture where misinformation and lies get the same sort of platform that truth does. So we have to help children recognize they need to be really critical consumers of information and recognize that new knowledge can cause us to reinterpret information.
Definitely. I think that's a really great point, and something that I think adults struggle with. And also I've seen with children, just Googling something and then just taking it for what it is and then being like, well, that's true. So there it is.
I'm working.
You know what I mean?
I'm working with some children right now virtually, and I had one little guy telling me something about how many of a type of turtle's nests there are left, and he said to me, well, I'm giving you a number, but I'm not sure it's valid. I haven't checked it with other sources. I've only checked it with one. And I thought, yes, like, because we had just been going through in the previous weeks how to determine the validity of a source and how to corroborate evidence. And so I was so proud of him
That's
being
amazing.
able to say, okay, well, I'm just telling you this number, but it may or may not be true because I haven't checked it. It was fantastic.
That's amazing. I think that's such a great skill, right? And I mean, fact checking and finding what is real and all of those things, to instill that at a young age is just amazing. Do you have any tips for how to do that with children? Like, the one that you're working with, just any advice?
Well, so when you're going to consider the validity of a source, adults or children, you want to take a look at like who wrote or is putting this information out there. So whether it's a book or an article or online, like who wrote it? What are their credentials? And that can help you determine, like, is it, just some guy down the street that decided to start a website, or is it
Right.
is it the guy down the street who started a website and has a PhD in the field and has worked and published and done all these things, right? So that's one thing to consider. When you look at a source, and especially this is true if you're going to go to Wikipedia first, which is a great place to start. Take a look and see what are the sources for that article. Are they reputable sources, right? So I talk with children about, like, is it from a government site? Like, is it from the National Park Service? Then maybe, or National Geographic. Does that seem like it might be a reasonable source? And ask, you don't have to tell the children, you can ask them. Ask them to apply their knowledge. Oh, yeah, National Geographic seems like it would be a reasonable source to me. Why? Well, because they publish these magazines. They've been doing these things for, So that's another thing to consider. Also look at what evidence is being offered. So a lot of people will make claims, and that just means you're saying whatever you think to be true, right? It's a claim.
Right.
But a claim needs to be supported with reasons and evidence. So see if that's true. See if it's been supported with reasons and evidence, or if it's just a claim. And also looking for other sources to corroborate. So, who else is counting the number of nests and knows the exact amount, right? And also look at when it was written. Something written in 1950 is going to have a very different sort of perspective than something written in the last 10 years. And that's just because different events and different knowledge existed at that time than it does now. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will be invalid, but it's just something to pay attention to and double check, because so much, something else has changed. So
I also think it's a great opportunity to talk about the differences between like opinions of somebody and then an actual fact, or you know what I mean? Like looking at different sources that you can come up with or you can find, and showing them the difference between all of those.
Right.
Because I think people, but it's easy to get confused, I think, especially as a kid, with someone's opinion versus, a study that they did. That makes sense.
But an opinion can be supported with reasons and evidence.
True.
And so it's okay to have it even just be an opinion if there's reasons and evidence that support that opinion. So what happens oftentimes with opinions or any claim is that people don't support it. And that's when you want to be really careful and look for your own then reasons and evidence to see if that opinion or a claim of any sort is valid, right?
Totally.
And it can be as simple as, I think that, Milky Ways are the best candy bar. Right? You can do that with children, have them justify. So they can make a claim, and that's totally an opinion, but they can still justify it and support it with reasons and evidence for those reasons, right? Because the evidence can
Totally.
be when we had 20 Milky Way bars at Halloween, they got eaten in 2 days, and the Mounds bars took, we still have some left, whatever, right? Like that's still evidence for the claim, even though it's kind of an opinion, right? So that's what we want. Like, opinions are valid.
Oh yeah.
And they can be true, but we want to then look for like the reasons and the evidence.
Yeah, I mean, and what this is just getting my mind thinking about is how opinionated and research-focused elementary children are, and how useful these types of lessons and experiences are and will be for them. Because the amount of times I had a child asking me or telling me they were going to do a research project or it's just all about research because they want to just devour information about whatever they're interested in, and helping them, figure out how to do that. And, that it's just amazing, and it's perfect for this age group,
Yeah. And we really want to develop that critical thinking. And I think for me, like the events of the last year have shown that we really need to make sure that we're focusing on critical thinking and an accurate understanding of history with our children, because it's clear that our general society is struggling with that, with both those things. And we want the children we work with, I said this at the conference, but, we had about a month ago, we had in our, in the U.S. Capitol building, anti-democratic and anti-government political forces that staged an insurrection, a violent insurrection. They took the Confederate flag and put it in the middle of our Capitol. I mean, I said, like, I'm sure probably the majority of them could do their math facts and they could read.
Right.
But they obviously don't understand history and don't have the ability to think critically, and they don't have a clear sense of how to affect change in our government. So for me, this last year, watching, the protests after the murder of George Floyd by police, and then, the long list of Black people that were murdered by police, unarmed Black people murdered by police this year, the global pandemic that, really displayed a massive failure of our government in the United States to manage that, and the fact that the U.S. didn't manage it had a ripple effect on the rest of the world. And so all of those things together really show me that our work with children we need to help them develop the skills they need to navigate these kinds of issues and to critically think about them and make well-informed decisions. And history is a natural discipline to allow them to practice those skills. And it's, like you said, really important to do at this age because their characteristics are really primed for it.
Definitely. And when you talk about history this way, and just in this conversation, it really makes history alive and current in a way. It doesn't make it seem old and outdated, as I think a lot of history curriculum can be, because history can be really boring, if you're not really, when you were talking about how history is always changing, I remember thinking that. I was like, that's such a cool perspective. And it's not a perspective, it's how it is. It's true. And how exciting to bring that to the kids.
Yeah. They can discover new things about history and interpret new evidence. That's the excitement of the approach.
So speaking a little bit about our history materials that we have in the classroom, you touched upon this, and I want to just reiterate it because I think it's really important. I want to talk about the materials we have that we should reconsider having in our classrooms or, rethink about. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to really apply a critical lens to our history approach. There's a lot of fantastic strengths to the way we approach history, right? It's very human-centered. It's focused on human capabilities and their gifts and using their hands and working together, which is a powerful way to approach history. It's individualized. There's no set curriculum, and it has the potential and the goal of being very inclusive of all of humanity, not just the famous people and not just the white people, right?
Right.
But a lot of our materials were, created in the mid-20th century. So I really encourage people to carefully consider whether you're going to use some of the charts and things in the classroom or what you need to do to adapt them so that they are more representative of our thoughts and approaches today. So, for example, the fundamental needs chart, beloved chart. Humans have the same needs, and we simply meet them in different ways. And it's a great theme to help children recognize that humanity is the same, right? We're not that different from one another. But there are a couple things we need to consider. Generally, with this approach about fundamental needs, I encourage you to really think about and recognize that racialized, marginalized, and exploited people did not always, and do not always, even now, have the ability to meet their needs. That ability has been constrained by systems of racism and power. So it's not simply that they live in a different place and have chosen to meet their needs differently. It's also the fact that oppression and power have limited their opportunity to meet their needs. So we want to be careful. It's not something we're going to throw at the 6-year-olds.
Right.
But it's something that we want to be conscious of so that they understand, enslaved people didn't meet their needs the way they did because that was their choice. Right? They met their fundamental needs the way that they did because they were only allowed certain ways to meet their needs by the enslavers. So we want to be sure that we're not forgetting that aspect of people meeting their fundamental needs. And then on that chart, there's a lot of outdated pictures, but there's one that's outright racist. And that is in the circle that represents with the word fur, where every other circle on the chart has an animal, a plant, or an object. In the one that says fur, as a fundamental human need for clothing, like how people met their need for clothing, it has 2 indigenous humans dressed, in historical dress. So we have to think, what message is that sending children about the humanity of these indigenous people when all the other things on this are plants, animals, and objects. So I would cover that one up with something else, or you can draw your own fundamental needs chart, or the children can.
I was just going to ask that, for teachers and guides who are wondering about these things and reconsidering things, still wanting to offer these lessons, in a new way, is it appropriate to create your own fundamental needs chart?
Of course. Of course. When these charts were created, like what Mario used to do, where they have their roots is Mario out on rambles with the children, talking about nature and the world and the cosmos, and periodically stopping to sketch a chart to give an impression or to help the children see something or understand something. So they have their roots in, creating it in the moment. And then, but that's hard for everyone to do all the time, right? So the charts were, were created to help teachers have these resources to support the children. So it doesn't go against the sort of purpose of the chart if you create charts that that stay true to this idea of showing that humans have fundamental needs, but you can have some representations that are, not racist.
Right. Of course. Right. I know. I think it's an important thing to note though, because just from personal experience, sometimes it feels like you can't touch the Montessori materials. It feels like and that's going against our whole conversation about how history is always changing and how we need to, uphold, principles of equity and everything like that. So it's good to just reiterate and say that out loud that, yes, re-examine what you're presenting.
Yep.
And it's absolutely okay to change it to reflect, something appropriate.
And, to be clear, AMI Global is working on these charts right now. So they are working on charts, they're working on timelines, they're working to eliminate and update, eliminate these seriously problematic images and update things. So, but you don't have to wait for that. It's okay to just start on things now. And when AMI has it available, they'll let you know. They will let you know.
That's great. That's great that they're, that's fantastic. Anything else that we, need to re-examine? I know this is a big conversation, but I just wanted to offer a few ideas.
I would just, really interrogate kind of all of it. The migrations charts are a challenge, in my opinion, because the migrations of humans are generally, well, first of all, there's no generally accepted types, really. I mean, if you dig into how historians and anthropologists and others evaluate and discuss migrations, billiard ball is not one of them, right? So you're not going to be able to Google billiard ball migration and find examples. These aren't just types of migrations that people talk about. And then also migrations are really important to study. I mean, there's a lot of movements of peoples throughout history that impact our understanding of history. So it's reasonable to look at them. The challenge I have with some of the migrations charts, or a lot of them, is that they, for example, the billiard ball one. Most migrations that occurred where one set of people moved into another territory that another group of people were living and pushed that group out, that wasn't just a ball bumping against another ball in a game, right?
Right.
It quite often, and most often, happened as a result of force and oppression and violence and brutality.
Right.
So if we compare some of these movements to a chart representing a game, we are sort of sanitizing and dehumanizing a little bit some of that. And it's not to say that I want to present in all its brutality some of these movements to young children, but I also don't want to give them the idea that it was just an elegant game. So I guess I would ask everyone to just take a look at all of the ways, the ideas of what we want to talk about with the children are strong and valid, but some of the ways we approach it may not fit with current times. And so I'd encourage everyone to really bring some critical interrogation to our history work so that we are not inadvertently reinforcing systems of white supremacy by trying to sanitize or cover up or hide the sort of the narrative of what's going on.
Definitely. I think that's so important. And I think also, for guides, anybody out there who's thinking about these things, and if you don't know where to start, reach out to your other Montessori guides, reach out to EAA. The EAA talk has been sort of a bustle since the refresher course. Definitely what I'm trying to say is this is really important. And it is really also, it's pretty overwhelming, but it's okay. And you just have to dive in and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. I mean, you can totally reach out to me. I don't have all the answers. This is something,
Right.
but this is something we all need to be like thinking about and working on. And one big component in your work, if you're supporting children in learning history, is it's just your job to become an active learner of history. Like you really have to start learning. You need to assume that what you have learned up till now may or may not be completely accurate or nuanced enough for your understanding. So you need to really dig into your own knowledge base. And so I highly recommend the crash course videos, which I think I've talked about before.
Yeah.
But they're like 10 or 15 minutes long. And if you can, it's essentially an AP history course online, sort of online. It's to help AP history students. And they have all sorts of different subjects, not just history, but and honestly, the AP history has done a lot of work to be inclusive and eliminate some white supremacy from its curriculum. So it's not perfect, but it's a great start. And that's an easy thing to do. If you can commit to watching one of those a week or 3 of those a week, that's going to help build your history knowledge, as well as like reading. There's lots of great books, especially books about marginalized cultures that have not traditionally been studied in history or had been avoided. The books are coming out all the time, like Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine just came out with an edited volume called 400 Souls. And each of the 400 souls that you learn about in that book is written by a different Black author or poet or activist or professor or whatever. There's about 400 different people in Black history. So there's lots of new stuff coming out that's accessible. Like for me, I've just been reading, 1 or 2 of those every few days to just, build up my knowledge. Because I only have time for little snippets of things. And so I just build in time for those little snippets. And that's where books like that and crash courses, videos, those kinds of things are great resources. You can reach out to your local museums. Most museums, most public historians right now are really focused on bringing forth unheard voices. And so tap into that and find out about local history and things like that from your local museums. You can follow historians on Twitter, and we can share some names with you that would be useful, because historians talk about this stuff all the time on Twitter. I mean, as nerdy as that is, right? But they do. Right. And if you're a Twitter user, which I am learning how to be, that's a great resource for getting snippets. Heather Cox Richardson is one who's got a blog, and she's become very popular in the last year, every day kind of interpreting events in the context of history, current events in the context of history. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do it. And I know you guys are busy and you're stretched this year, and it's been such a hard year. And that's true. And this is hard work to build your knowledge so that you can support the children. But we can do these hard things, and we need to, right? There's some concerning forces at work in terms of impacting democracy in our sort of our country. And it's important to understand those and to then be able to present let the children explore history in a way that's going to help them, be critical in their thinking about our country's past as well as our country's present and future.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What amazing resources, Jamie. That was awesome. And definitely, should people reach out to you at All Things Montessori or through Rising Tide? What would you?
Yeah. I mean, you can come to Rising Tide if you're interested in some history resources. We have a very incomplete preliminary start on some resources for people with U.S. history. And that's at risingtide.org/ or whatever, / We'll put it.
I'll link it.
You'll link it.
Yeah.
U.S. history resources. So there's some stuff linked there that can help you. And you can always reach out to me through Rising Tide, as this is just part of the work that we're working on. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Jamie, again for, going through this again. It's such an amazing and important topic. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, reach out to Jamie. And of course, you can always email us at allthingsmontessoripod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And yeah, have fun with history. Really just, dig in.
Yeah,
have fun.
It is. It is such fun when you learn these things. So yeah, have fun with it.